some of the interesting things that have happened since the last time we were here. So first and
Awesome. Glad
foremost,
to be.
you got a new car, huh?
Yeah, I just posted up on X about that. I've been driving this thing for about a week now, and the post on X was just to highlight the experience I've had purchasing and driving cars in China for the last 20 years, and how this industry, it's been, I mean, everything that I've seen over the last 20 years has been incredible, but I think one of the things that's really, like a daily use incredible thing is the cars. And I'm just blown away by this thing. It's a 2026 Zeekr 9X Hyper. And as I wrote in my tweet, I don't think I've ever owned or even been in a car as nice as this thing. And it's a really strange thing to say, given that in the past I've owned and driven Chinese cars that were just absolute crap, and you thought, like, how will they ever improve on this? and then here they are. So yeah, it's pretty insane.
That's cool. That's the SUV you posted, the black jobby.
Yeah, it's a six-seater SUV, 3 rows, and this is their top of the line. So Zeekr is a brand here in China, which is ultimately owned by Geely. And Geely are this massive Chinese conglomerate who also happen to own stakes or full ownership of things like Volvo. I think they own a stake in, or they fully own Lotus, and I think maybe MG, and I don't know. They've bought up a lot of Western car brands and then remade those brands. So it's not unusual to be driving around China and see a lot of Volvos and MGs and Lotus branded cars on the
Huh.
road, but they are in fact being designed at and manufactured by the Geely conglomerate.
Oh, interesting. So that's, I guess, got a little bit of European provenance as well. So they've probably pulled in a little bit of talent from there too, I imagine.
Well, for sure, and that's the thing I mentioned in my tweet, was that the first time that I saw this was back just before my son Lucky was born. He's going to be 7 this year, so this was 7 years ago, 8 years ago. We bought a BYD Tang DM, so that's also a gas hybrid electric, and that car had been designed interior and exterior by former Audi designers who had been at the Audi Design Center in Shanghai or in China somewhere. And you could really feel it. Like, you got into that car and you thought, okay, this feels like a BMW or an Audi. And I don't mean just like looks and kind of feel, I mean like the materials, the styling, everything about it. And that was something of a big upgrade, because for a long time, Chinese designed cars were really gauche. I mean, they were tacky, right? There was something about them that felt kind of trying a little too hard, and kind of mixing and matching the materials and the colors in a way that just didn't feel right. And this BYD, they absolutely nailed it. I mean, you would not have been able to sit in that thing and not know that it wasn't an Audi or a BMW unless you looked at the brand tag in it, right?
Hmm.
And nowadays, you look at like the Zeekrs, they're using these external design teams. I think a lot of the Zeekr designs come from Sweden, or there's a design team somewhere over in the Northern European somewhere. And it shows. I mean, the level of design quality, the materials, it's leather, it's wood, it's all of this combination of crystal and lighting, and it's just incredible. It's like you're stepping into a 5-star hotel, but it's a 1,300 horsepower 6-seater freaking super SUV, right? So it's
Pretty cool.
pretty interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like they've got it dialed in. I know BYD was one of the only really kind of trustworthy names in Chinese cars for a long time. So it's good to see some other companies have gotten on board.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know everybody tuned in to hear about your brand new car.
Yeah, no, I doubt that, but
No, but it's
yeah.
interesting. So thought I might as well mention it. But really, something else that did happen recently was your pop up store in Japan. So that went well, right?
Yeah, that went really well. I didn't have sort of much expectation. I didn't know what to expect from it. We kind of went into it blind and unknowing. It was our first time ever doing a pop-up store, and
Mm-hmm.
it was not my first time in Japan, but working with the team we worked with there and everything, it was a lot of fresh and interesting challenge for us. And it started off, I think, a little bit slow, but once I showed up and was doing the signings and meet and greets, it got really busy over the course of the weekend. And I met a lot of really great people. I heard a lot of really moving stories. And ultimately, we had a really great event, and a lot of good came out of it.
Yeah, I saw a lot of great photos come out from there. Looked like a really fun time, so glad that went
Yeah, it
through
was
so
cool.
very well.
I mean, there were people coming from literally all over the world. There were people that were being sent on missions by their friends back in the home country, people
Cool.
from Europe or the US who were showing up and saying, I have no idea who you are, but my friend back in the US said I have to come here and get your autograph, and that kind of thing. But for me, most importantly, was the experience of meeting a lot of fans who brought their stories about how the games and also how the plushies had brought something positive into their lives. And a lot of those people brought stories that were really, really moving, like brought me to tears in the middle of the event while sitting there at a table. And I'd look across at, the person who'd handed me the note or was telling me the story, and I'd feel bad because like they've got this 50-year-old guy now crying in front of them. But I couldn't help myself sometimes. If you read a note from somebody who says that 20 years ago or longer, they played the first Alice game while living in an abusive household, and it was what pulled them through and stopped them from self-harm or worse. And, then go on to explain that it informed them becoming an animator or an artist or a musician, and how to this day it's a kind of guiding light for them. Well, I mean, you can't help but be humbled and moved.
I can only imagine.
So this happened repeatedly over the course of that event. And it was what led to me deciding that, okay, I think I'll come out of the shadows, I'll come out of retirement, and I'll continue.
It's time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there were direct requests. There were a couple of people who just looked at me directly in the eye and said, please keep creating, please keep telling your stories. And I felt that I didn't have the right to say no to them,
Hey, that's
and
fair.
It also kind of made me feel like I don't feel like that other people have the right, to say to me to go away, be quiet, remove yourself. So I left Japan, got on the plane, and I started writing, and it just came out like a flood. It was crazy. I got back home in Shanghai, and my kids were at the dining room table drawing, and I literally picked up a crayon and one of their empty notepads and started scribbling story ideas. And the kids are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Dad's writing." Go back to your
Well,
drawing.
before we get into kind of that negative side of things, why don't you tell us a little bit about the new project?
Which one are we talking about?
The new game.
Okay. So yeah, I ask that because there's so much going on.
That's fair. That's fair. I follow you
yeah.
and Jen, so I know.
So there's actually two game concepts that we started off with, something called Dreadful Land. So Dreadful Land was the narrative that I started scribbling as soon as I got back to my hotel room in Tokyo after that event. And that has the possibility to become a film, a game, a book series, who knows. But it's something that I started writing as a potential spiritual successor to Alice Madness Returns, meaning that it's set in the same period of time in Victorian London, and it's happening on the same streets. And in fact, there's a kind of crossover between the characters, but not such that we could get sued, right?
Right.
And so for me, it's a cathartic experience in being able to go in there and wrap up some loose ends, or to continue some of the story elements and continue telling a similar type of story. This is a narrative where the main character, who's a young boy, is using his internal imagination landscape to explore emotions that he's dealing with or bottling up. And, of course, it's set in a kind of Sherlock Holmes murder mystery framework. but it's a similar concept to Alice exploring her internal, emotional, psychological landscape inside of Wonderland. But this place is called Dreadful Land. Not a super original move, but naming wise. But I think for the audience to have that kind of recognition that we're going to another one of America's lands.
Yeah, it's like you got the brand recognition there, the corporate identity, whatever you like to call it.
Something like that, yeah. So I started working on that story, and I've gotten to the point where the whole thing is fairly well mapped out. We shared a lot of images from the various locations and some of the work we were doing on defining the characters, that kind of stuff. I shared a lot of artwork on that. Meanwhile, in the background, Jennifer, who you mentioned, she's the brains of our operation, by the way. Like I'm just this messy kind of like splatter paint everywhere and come up with crazy ideas. But in terms of marketability,
Jen's a force. She is amazing.
She is. But she's the one who will say something smart like, well, hey, given the current industry dynamics and where we're at, maybe we should be focusing on something smaller and more parsable, So that's where the concept for Spare Hearts sprang forth, from her imagination and her understanding of where the market is and where game development is. And that's essentially taking the Dreadful Lands universe and backing up a bit in time, so that we're still in the mind of that same little boy, but we're also in a kind of collective subconscious, emotional subconscious, with the ability for there to be all of us in there, that little boy included, but still keeping that Victorian era sensibility, art style, and of course the kind of signature dark, cute stuff that we do. I think Jennifer referred to that as like she creates the cute stuff and I pour the lava on top of it or something like that.
There you go.
So that game is more, though, in line with her sensibilities as a gamer. So if you ask me, hey, go make a game, I will make a big action adventure narrative driven Alice Madness Returns style big AAA game, right? That's the only thing I know how to do.
That's what you do. What you know.
Yeah, I mean that's the shape of the die in my parts pressing machine, right? That's
right. Yeah.
But Jennifer I mean, I don't want to define her as a gamer, but she certainly plays a lot more of the casual games, the life sim games, that kind of stuff than I do. And so her sense was that our audience also would like something like that. And obviously not to say we'll never do the larger narrative driven thing, but to start with, if we build a smaller, cute, casual life sim in the Plushie Dreadfuls universe, it's something that we can actually tackle as a team, as a development team by ourselves. And so that's what we've recently begun to do. We've brought on board a 3D modeling person, we've brought on board a programmer, and now that makes us a development team as well as being a toy company. So yeah, Plushie Dreadfuls Spare Hearts is officially being built as we speak, but it's a small team and it's going to take us a while before we have something meaningful that we can show to the public. But in the meantime, I'm sharing art and story, and Jennifer's been doing some animation tests of some of the characters, so it's coming to life.
No, that's great. And honestly, that's probably a very prudent way of approaching it. If you're putting out bite-sized bits as opposed to a full end, we're going to have to get some money together, get some backers, and do this thing proper. That's an undertaking.
The beauty. Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of it. It's difficult to release, a small piece, a small taste of a full-blown AAA narrative-driven action-adventure game. Like, how you release something of that's only 10 minutes in length without still having to build up a massive team to do that. Whereas with the Spare Hearts game, it can be built in a modular fashion. It can be that we start off with simple functionality around just pulling people's existing collections of Plushie Dreadfuls from the shop purchases into a virtual space, a little village, a place where those characters can interact a little bit with the environment. And then as people are attracted to that space, we start adding in more and more layers of interactivity and actual gameplay experience. And so there's a couple of games historically that have managed to do that and build themselves from a little small thing all the way up to a very big and successful thing, and that's the path that we are going to attempt to follow.
Yeah, I mean, you could always use that as kind of your Roblox base, and then just go from there. That it wouldn't be the first time it's happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Although, you know, Roblox may be a little
Yeah, that's
grand,
going a little.
but, you know,
That's yeah, exactly. It's going a little bit beyond that
out
because
of
obviously
scope.
that
There
has
we
the
go.
whole ability for people to build their own experiences in there and all those kind of things. Sure, that'd be great to get there, but I mean, for right now, I think where our sights are set is more just as it's a specific game in and of itself, containing all of the characters from the Plushie Dreadfuls universe, which constantly that list is growing. We're well over 300 different characters at this point, and I think that as a starting place, just that by itself, like giving people access to that catalog of all the plushies that we have and we've ever made, and giving them a space in which those can live and interact lightly, that'll be a pretty good starting point for us.
Well, I guess you could say kind of like the maybe starting out something kind of like a Tomodachi Life or a Animal Crossing kind of vibe,
Exactly.
Right?
That's exactly right.
Okay, yeah, and that is a good way in, and if it does do well, I mean, at the very least, you know, people kind of know the characters and have something fun they can do, because a lot of people enjoy those. It's got a good, what would you say, kind of cross-cultural interest, I guess, compatibility.
Yeah, of course. I mean, those kind of games are huge the world round, and I think that again, it often is coming back to the characters. You know, people feel a certain resonance with the characters, and we see that people, when they purchase their plushies and they go online to share about that, you can see the outline of a person's personality and character as a function of the purchases they've made from our shop, right? So it's kind of like a purchase history reverse Rorschach or something. You know, you can look at a person's account and be like, oh, that's interesting. You know, they've purchased this cluster of plushies that center around certain cultural and or medical or psychological themes, and you can actually get a pretty good sense of who that person is or what cohort they fit into amongst our audience based on that purchase history.
I would believe that, and the Plushie Dreadfuls line is kind of uniquely well suited for something like that, because you've got such personal designs, you know, things that are very close to who a person might be or identify as.
Yeah, it's crazy. I often tell people when we're talking about the success of Plushie Dreadfuls that we've built the library of a Disney in relation to the depth of the character catalog, but we haven't yet built the universe around them, right? So we have, you know, our Mickey to our Goofy to our Pixar characters, you know, Toy Stories. I mean, all of the range of various characters and experiences they exist within the catalog now, and it's I have to say, it's a really inspiring catalog to work with. I've been working on 2 fairy tale stories now that are set in that Plushie Dreadfuls universe, and just being able to pull characters from the library and use those to flesh out these stories has been a real joy. But I think that what we haven't done yet is build the universe properly, you know, the world building.
Where are they?
Yeah, exactly. So we are now doing that, and that's been a lot of fun doing that. That process has been really interesting. So that's where, you know, Spare Hearts is going. That's where Dreadful Lands is going.
Oh, cool. That sounds very interesting. And I know you've got a built-in audience, but you know, just based on who I know is working on the project, it's going to probably turn out pretty cool.
I think it's going to be all right. I mean, that made us laugh. At an early stage, we were thinking, well, we got to go out and find a development team to work on this. and we started looking around and talking to some people. And at some point I was like, wait a second, we are game developers. why are we going out and talking to other people? Like, we literally are game developers. Like, that's where we come from.
Yeah.
Maybe we just do this on our own. So yeah, I think that not only does the team have, some of the technical and artistic competence, but I think one of the other interesting things about the team, the makeup of the team, is that it is a sort of rogues gallery of people who've been through the industry and in various ways abused or misused, by the industry. My story of the sort of trials and tribulations with EA is fairly well known, but everyone on the team, from Jennifer and people in the art team and our support team, they've all had their own experiences within the industry, the games industry, and come away from that with a pretty clear understanding of things that we would never want to do or experience or see done to our audience again. And I think that's really helping to inform the decisions that we're making. And I hope that results in something that's good for the game and for us as a development team, and obviously for the audience.
Well, at the very least, it's going to make for a healthy development house.
I hope so. But the team inside of Plushie Dreadfuls is very healthy. It's a funny situation, because a lot of the people most of the people are otherwise unemployable. They would not be able to find a typical or traditional job, and that could be as a function of their mental health status or of their physical health situation, that they simply couldn't go to work a quote unquote normal job. So the team very much mirrors a lot of the issues that are contained in the designs of the plushes. And I think that has created a really unique sense of camaraderie, of belonging, of ownership within the company and within the brand.
You could say you are your own Isle of Misfit Toys.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, we very much mirror what it is that we're putting out there as a product lineup. And that's not to say at all that the products are trying to be everything to everyone. Far from it. I think highlighting the unique nature of the team and how that's mirrored in the products is meant to be a statement to suggest that our team is unique, and the overlap or the alignment that our team's sensibilities and therefore our product sensibilities might have with the world in general is not meant to be one-to-one, right? We're not out there trying to please absolutely everybody. We're, I think, resonating with a bunch of people who are similar to us and see something in our products that reflects something in them.
Well, on top of that too, there's an inherent value in honesty, and you're going to get people that'll be interested just in the fact that what you're selling is honest, and you're not trying to sell something that you don't care about, that you don't believe in. It's never a cash grab. It's always something, at least with some heart.
I appreciate you saying that, but I think you're as well you're aware as anybody of the fact that there are a lot of people out there. I don't know if it's a lot, but there are definitely some voices out there who voice those criticisms, who want to detract from what it is we're trying to do and want to try to assume that our intentions are the worst intentions, right? So
I've seen it firsthand, and if you don't mind, that makes the perfect segue. So there's been some drama, some very, very silly drama too, as a matter of fact. I guess we should probably address the older one from before the Japanese pop-up. That was just one person that was basically going everywhere and just trying to smear the name, right?
You'll have to tell me specifically which one you're talking about, because we get
the many and varied dramas. Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, before we talk about that, any specifics.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to mention something as a general to people who are listening, and that is that, you know, I got started in the games industry back in the early 90s working on Doom, and then Doom 2 and Quake 2. And this was a period of time before the internet as you know it today even existed. Back then, there was no HTTP, there was no World Wide Web, right? And so there were things that we were doing back then by way of communicating with the audience that I was doing that to some degree I was inventing. For example, I didn't invent the notion of the plan file. This is a thing in Unix where you can put a plan file on your machine, and then other people on the internet could pull the information from that file. So in essence, this was like the earliest form of blog posting or something like that, right? And but I started using it very extensively for the release notes and just commentary notes and communicating with the audience for the id products, for Doom and Quake, very early on. I say that to make clear that I've been on the internet communicating with audiences for that long, since the early 90s. So we're going on, 30 plus years, right?
Oh, yeah.
And in all of that time, and working through, you know, the rise of the social media platforms and, you know, communicating with people online about all the various products that I've built on forums and on social media platforms in the games industry, I never once saw anything like this. I think we had one situation where there was a forum that kind of got taken over and got a bit poisoned, and we had to close down for Spicy Horse. But other than that, this experience inside of the plush world has been unbelievably weird and I guess unique, right? And I never would have guessed it. I would not have guessed, coming from the games industry, where you think, reading from the headlines of, you know,
Oh yeah, it's like, oh, this is where all the haters and all the vitriol resides. But oh my god, and you aren't lying, sir. I've seen some of it. It's crazy.
Well, so it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I thought going into plush toys would be like, hey, this will be easy. Hey, you know, great, it's soft plush, happy toys. You know, bye drama. No,
oh man,
no,
there are some cutthroat folks out there, man.
Dude, I tell you, it's absolutely crazy. So yeah. So back to you wanted to go back a little bit. Are you trying to, which drama are you referring to? I mean, the first real drama that ever popped up for us was this pansexual thing that got blasted onto Reddit. Is that what you're referring to?
I believe so, because we were talking about this back in September of last year.
Yeah, and you know, once that blew up, I tried for a while to, you know, address it directly in the thread where it came up and apologize there, and then apologize publicly on my Instagram and other platforms, which also got rebroadcast to Reddit, you know, that I'd made an apology. And then I said, all right,
water for them.
What's that?
That's blood in the water for Reddit.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, they certainly did not accept the apology. That post was just crapped upon like crazy. You know, people just said, oh, you know, he's only apologizing because he has to, or he got caught, or this is insincere, or what, you know. So I decided, all right, I'm just going to remove myself from being online. The other reason was that post to Reddit began a relentless series of retaliatory, you know, posts and comments and attacks on me, on the team, on our social media posts, you name it, plus death threats.
Well, I saw some of the most ugly things ever posted on Twitter about you, about Jen, about Plushie Dreadfuls. It's just completely out of left field stuff. Like the people that you directly employ and represent are like, you hate these people. It's like, what the hell is wrong with you? You mad people?
Well, I mean, I feel really bad for our staff. So, you know, there's the people that kind of make their comments and they're being hateful. And then there's people that write in and tell our staff to kill themselves. And the comments on the social media posts that are similar. And that are just really hateful. I mean, that is really, at the end of it, it's incredibly hateful, and it's also really irrational, really illogical. So for those people listening who don't have an awareness of what we're talking about here, there used to be a Discord for Plushie Dreadfuls, and I was fairly active in there. And there was a behind the scenes section of that Discord that I would hop into on an almost daily basis and chat with the members of the Discord about what was going on behind the scenes at Plushie Dreadfuls. Now, I never once in that Discord engaged in anything related to politics or cultural or sexuality or any debates or conversations about any of that stuff. I was there purely to share behind the scenes, and that meant that I often was sharing, snippets of the photo shoots I was doing or the videos I was making or talking about upcoming products, redesigns, things like that.
Yeah, talking shop, talking business.
Yeah. So there came a day where we were talking about redesigns, when or if certain of our plushies might get a redesign, meaning that they have a certain design at launch and then people want to see a color variation or something like that. And somebody asked me, will there be a redesign for the pansexual rabbit? And this question came days after I'd been having a conversation with Jennifer about the sales trends for the pansexual rabbit, because in response to a phase of interest on TikTok, which had by that point died out, the sales of the pansexual rabbit had dropped significantly. So we had done an initial 1,000 unit order of that, and they had, because of the TikTok phase of interest, the trend, they had sold out almost in just a month or something like that, very, very quickly. So in response to that, we're like, oh, sold out in a month. Well, we'll order another batch of them, and we ordered 2,000 more of them. Well, after the 2,000 arrived, and we probably sold half of those or something, that trend, that phase of interest died completely. And by the way, when we talk about this, TikTok at that moment was flooded with videos of people coming out as pansexual, talking about pansexual issues and pansexuality in general. And when that sort of thing happens and we're feeding ads into the system, then you can capitalize on the trend, right?
Oh yeah, of course.
And that's perfectly normal. All brands do that kind of stuff, and all brands also end up reacting to or watching as something like that ends. So anyway, back to the day on Discord. That's the background for it. Somebody said, will this get a redesign? And I said, well, this was a phase of interest with certain people on TikTok. You can go on to Reddit and look up what my specific wording in response to the question was. Now, when I typed that, I had no interest. I had no understanding or any idea in my brain that the word phase, combined with anything related to sexuality.
Oh, I see it now. Oh no,
was problematic. So I've heard people jokingly suggest about me that I am a fossilized American liberal from the year 2000, still living in China. Right? I haven't had my software updated since the year 2000.
Well, it was a better version of Windows anyway, so you're good.
Yeah. So, but I say that because my software that I run in my brain does lean liberal, right? I lived in San Francisco. I was involved in the LGBT community at that time, and I would have identified at that time by what they now call pansexual. Back then, I think they called bisexual, but whatever. The end of the day, I don't have an anti-LGBT or anti-pansexual or anything bone in my body. Why would I? But I also don't know what the current standards for the lingo, for the communication, for the use of words is. And that's fine. Like if somebody came and said, hey, you shouldn't use pansexual in relation to phase, under normal circumstances, I'd be like, yeah, fine, cool, whatever, that's fine. On that day, the person that came to go, hey, you shouldn't use pansexual in relation to, was somebody who had engaged in stirring shit, scamming the shop, demanding all kinds of concessions and other things from us for months leading up to that day, and who I had had it up to my eyeballs with. And so that person steps in there and goes, "Hey, tisk tisk, you shouldn't use this phrasing." And I was just like, dude, I don't have time for you. This is not why we're here. And I immediately said to them, I'm referring to a phase of interest on TikTok. And I said to them, don't come at me like that. Meaning, don't come to me assuming that I have bad intentions about pansexuality or phases or any of this stuff, because obviously I don't. That's not the conversation we're having. That's not who I am. That's not why we're here. So I felt that person was out of line for trying to come and correct me. Now, I can say, hey, anybody who heard that, who was offended, I'm sorry. I apologize. My wording could have been better. Yes, that's absolutely fine. That's the end of it. I would think that's the end of it, right? There was a conversation had in private. Somebody came to correct me. I didn't like that person for valid reasons that I didn't like that person. I basically told them to step off, and I threatened to ban them because not because they were saying something about pansexuality, about phases, because I don't like that person.
Oh yeah. Well, and you're going to come into my house and speak to me this way?
Well, so you would think that's it. That's the end of the whole situation, but no.
Oh, if only.
It turns out that the moderators of the Discord went on to become disgruntled because they were let go. They waited until they were paid their final month of compensation for the work they'd done, and then they turned around and posted that up onto Reddit. And of course, the way they posted it up was under a misleading headline. Plushie Dreadful's creator calls pansexuality a phase. Now, the proper headline should have been to also add, and then makes clear that that's not what he was trying to say, because he was referring to a phase of interest on TikTok. But that doesn't get the people enraged. That doesn't do the damage that these people are hoping to do. And so that post blew up, and ever since then it just keeps coming back up over and over and over. People keep rehashing it, and they ignore the immediate clarification. They ignore the apology. They ignore who I am in my track record and history as an individual, as a creator. They ignore my own identity and who I am and where I come from.
Yeah, your own lived experience.
My own lived experience.
The thing that matters the most, right? The lived experience of the individual. And here they are just writing you off.
I want to make really clear on one thing. There have been a lot of people from the LGBT community and pansexual individuals in particular who've come into the comments or DM'd me directly and said, this is all nonsense. We know what you meant, and only a media illiterate or intentionally, somebody with an intention to damage or to create drama, only people like that would blow this up and take this out of context and turn it into the thing they've turned it into. But at the end of the day, that is what I have finally come to live with and accept, that we're not dealing with people who want to look at things in context and be rational, and also to just be forgiving and accepting. We're not dealing with people like that. We're dealing with people who intend to harm, who intend to cause drama, and who intend something that has nothing to do with the core issue that's being described here, right? They're not interested in rights or in phrasing or in any of that. They're simply interested in doing damage.
Well, and they're not even really interested in representation. They're bullies. They just found a new group to join to be bullies.
Well, and so we, on the topic of bullying, I spent over a year with my socials made private, hoping that this would die down, hoping that it would go away. I wrote a fairly long explainer and apology, making clear what I meant, and I posted it up on my blog. And we tried on numerous occasions to gently, directly address this in various places. It has, to this day, not gone away. These people continue to pick it up, like a baseball bat and whack anybody and everybody with it. And then this brings us back to Reddit. So there is a Reddit sub called /plushies, where this was brought up on a weekly basis, constantly brought up. Anybody who posted up a positive, like, hey, I've just purchased a Plushie Dreadfuls, they would immediately get corrected and told how this isn't right. You shouldn't support these guys. These guys are the devil, over and over and over and over again, to the point where the Google search results, the Reddit search results, all of these AI search results got poisoned by this idea that American McGee is anti-LGBT. This started surfacing anytime you typed in my name. And at that point, I called up my lawyers and I said, we're going to send letters to Reddit and to the moderators of this sub to ask that they take down the fictitious, the libelous statements about me, the ones that are feeding into the AI search results, the ones that specifically drive this idea that I am anti-LGBT.
Oh, yeah, they're directly hurting your business.
Well, no, I mean, it's not about hurting the business.
Above and beyond anything personal, though. I mean, so, obviously it's personal, but, you know.
No, I mean, it's 100% personal. This is never. So none of this stuff has directly translated to hurting the business, I think, in the way that these people have hoped that it would, right?
I've noticed that. I'm glad to see it, too, just to be clear.
Yeah, no, I mean, I want to be clear on this point, because just going online and saying negative things about me, people want to call me a dick, that's fine. They want to say our products are exploitive, whatever. Those are opinions that people are allowed to have and express. I have no problem with that. Where I draw the line is that if you go and punch in Plushie Dreadfuls or American McGee, and Google search results pop up and say American McGee is a controversial anti-LGBT figure, that's where I'm saying, no, you're not doing that. You're not getting away with that, because that is 100% not true. And when you go to look at how the AI picks that up, it's because on Reddit, there are these human curated information overview sections that a living person at Reddit goes and creates based on comments made by anonymous Reddit users in these subs. So that means that there is a person curating and publishing false information knowingly that is then picked up by the AI and spread to the world outside. That isn't just like not cool, that's fucking illegal. And so that's where I said to the lawyers, this has to stop. And ultimately, what's being asked here is incredibly reasonable, and it is something in line with the rules of Reddit and also the rules of the sub in which this situation exists. And that is, the moderators of that sub should look at a comment that says American McGee is an anti-LGBT piece of shit and go, this isn't really in line with the rules of our community. Because the rules of the community make it very clear, you're not supposed to harass people, you're not supposed to be spreading hate and negativity, and yet, when it comes to comments about me personally like that, they don't just let those comments stand, they boost them. They make those comments the comments that everyone sees and that gets pulled into the Reddit information box and then gets scraped by the AI and sent up to Google. So this is not accidental. This is intentional, malicious, and by design.
It is. It absolutely is. I've seen this very thing happen with other creators in other tertiarily related industries, and it's a playbook.
Yeah, it is. So we know that this goes on in other subs. It goes on within other industries and around other creators as well. So I'm not unique in experiencing this kind of thing. And, we've dug into it a bit. We understand that the moderator of the /plushies sub, he owns a business called Plushies LLC. So he owns a business entity. He makes plush toys And guess what his plush toys do? They represent mental health issues, autism, you name it. So his business is a direct competitor in terms of type of product and the theme of the product to ours. So he's a direct competitor with an LLC called Plushies running a sub called Plushies.
Moderating your sub.
Well, I mean,
your company.
I mean, we have Plushies. We have the word plushie in our brand name. So, there is now another question and conversation going on about whether or not this creates trademark confusion, because Plushie Dreadfuls is trademarked. And so we're now having the conversation with our lawyers as to whether or not this continued behavior underneath, a sub which is owned by an LLC, which is a competitor, which has such a similar name to our own, doesn't constitute market confusion, trademark violation.
There's some very real anti-competitive questions to ask there.
Very much so. But look, I want to say something really quick. Anybody listening to this, I'm not anti-free speech. I'm not anti-LGBT. I'm not anti-business, right? If those guys want to talk shit about me on a opinion level, that's fine. I have no problem with that. If they want to compete and make their own plushies that are in a similar style or theme, that's fine. I have no problem with that. Where we're at here, though, is a weaponizing of Reddit and this sub and these ideas about me and against the business. And I think morally it's not right, and I think legally it's also not right. But here's the thing. If those people would just go away and leave us alone, we don't have to go and engage the lawyers. We don't want to do that. I'd rather be spending my time writing stories and working on new products than dealing with lawyers. And I feel like they would too, right? I don't really get why this narrative is so important to them that they can't stop and go, maybe we should stop attacking this guy. Maybe we should stop attacking his business. Maybe we should stop putting it out to the world and to Google and all these places that this guy is something that he's not. Because that's all I'm asking. And I feel like that's a fairly reasonable ask. I'm not being a jerk about this. I'm saying, please stop painting me as anti-LGBT, because I'm not. And please stop inventing all this lore around me as the devil, because I'm not. But, my sense is that when we make those reasonable requests, they see that as a kind of weakness, or they see it as...
he's afraid.
I feel that that's what we've seen so far. They flip it around into we're victimizing them, and that we're the bullies, and that we're the ones that are doing something wrong here. I don't know. What I do know is that I'm willing to say to that community, I'm sorry, and if my phrasing was bad, then I apologize for that. And that a lot of the lore that's being created around us just isn't correct. That's not who we are as people or as creators. And we really wish, myself and the team, that people could just let it go. Just give it a break and move on. Allow us the space to be who we are and to create the products that we create, and not keep this battle going, because it's not serving any purpose. And I think that, that's the final thing. I think a lot of these people think that what they're doing here is damaging us as a business. Actually, the business is doing great. I mean, it's almost hilarious that every time we see them post up and make some big post that blows up on the Slash Plushies forum, our sales go through the roof. So, I mean, if their goal is to somehow stop people buying our products, they're not going about that the right way. They're not getting the result that they want. So, if anything, if their hope was to somehow get people to stop buying from us, their better move would just be to leave us alone and ignore us, and then we'll happily leave them alone and ignore them as well.
I don't know if you're familiar. Obviously, you've heard the name Ethan Klein and H3H3, but they're going through. Basically, he's been dealing with what you've been dealing with, but for a more extended period. And they went a lot harder. They actually called CPS on him for his kids and sent human skulls to his house. So
I'm aware of that situation, and Jennifer and I've talked about it, and I've said to her that I would expect that if I were still living in the U.S., I would have also become victim to that kind of behavior. And I say that not just randomly, but because we know for a fact that not only have things like this subreddit been weaponized against us, but we know for a fact that there are Discord servers where this kind of activity,
it's coordinated.
It's coordinated 100%. And we know that because we've had people that have got into those Discord servers and they've found that behavior actively taking place. They've screenshotted and recorded all of that stuff for our files for future use. But what we've found is very much in line with the Ethan Klein type of situation, where you have people who I don't know if they're aware that this kind of organized interference with a business operation in the U.S., how illegal that is, but clearly they don't know that, or they don't think they've been recorded, or they're going to get caught. But what they're doing is conspiracy, and it is conspiracy to harm a business entity, and also it's conspiracy against me as an individual. And I really wish that the people that were involved in this stuff had a better understanding of the liability they're racking up for themselves as individuals. That Ethan Klein situation could very well lead to
this could set precedents in situations just like yours.
That's exactly right. It'll set precedents for anonymous users in Discords and on Reddit being dragged into the spotlight and being forced to pay for the things like this that they've done.
Yeah. A day of reckoning, if you will. You might very well have to account for what you've said and what you've done if you've really crossed the line.
In me is not a desire. Like I said, I don't have like that desire to seek revenge on people.
Oh yeah, I don't see a Conan in you going after revenge against everyone that wronged you.
I've lived through a lot of really tough stuff, and I've seen a lot of really bad crap fall on the heads of my family. And I just don't have the desire in me to see more suffering in the world. I feel like the world is full of enough suffering as it is. And again, this comes back to my wish that these people would just accept the notion of live and let live. Let us do what we do, because it's not harming you. If we make a plushie for OCD and you don't necessarily agree with the design of it, that's fine. That's totally fine. You can even go online and say you don't like it. But to suggest that we're doing something wrong, like morally or in terms of capitalism and selling stuff, because we as artists have produced something that resonates with us, our lived experience, and with the experience of a segment of the audience, that's going too far, right? That's people policing other people's actions and behaviors and decisions in a way that's wrong. But they're taking it even further, because they're not just stopping at the trying to police it, in a verbal sense. They're trying to do damage to the business. They're trying to destroy us. They're wishing for our destruction. And that brings a legal implication into it.
It does. It's one of those. It's a careful line, and a lot of these people are very uncautious in walking it and have crossed it numerous times. Yourself, for an example, H3H3, and that's just two very public examples. This happens every day to all sorts of people. I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing that these folks be taught that there are social lines, and just because you're some rando on the internet doesn't mean you can necessarily get away with being an absolutely atrocious human being.
Well, I'm gonna spin off into conspiracy theory here for a second.
Sure.
I've I left the U.S. Over 20 years ago, and growing up in the U.S., my initial viewpoint and political position was idealistic and optimistic, and like most American kids, told that we had a functional system of democracy with checks and balances and a constitution that guaranteed certain inalienable rights and all this kind of stuff, right? But over the years, I became more and more cynical as I watched various things happen within the society and within the security structure of the U.S. that gave the powers that be within the government the excuse to roll back those rights. And I often look at what's happening online right now, and I think that the craziness, the vitriol, the anger, and all of this that's being spun up, and where people are being weaponized against each other, those are manufactured to some degree in the grander scheme of undoing anonymous online activity, for example.
Oh, absolutely.
In a super highly functional democratic society, you and I would have the right to anonymous online activity. Here in China, where I live, you don't have that right. So, some people would say that that's infringement on people's, freedom of speech, whatever. On the flip side, you don't get these kind of snark, subreddits and these kind of anonymous attack trolls that are bothering individuals or bothering businesses. So, I think there's a question as to how much of what we're seeing is not geared towards undoing anonymous online activity.
No, that's a very fair question. A very fair question indeed. If you there is some merit to that. How many chaos actors do we have out there that are just working towards getting us all identified online because we can't have this sort of thing?
That's exactly correct. So I'm not trying to suggest that our haters on Reddit, because people love to twist things that I say. There's going to be somebody that pops up and goes, ha ha, he thinks we're all, NSA spooks. No. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying, though, is that there are, elements of that prod people one direction or another. It's not that every single person on Reddit is on team undo anonymous online activity, but it only takes a few people to every once in a while fan the flames to keep that kind of stuff going. And of course, we've seen multiple instances of various U.S. Enforcement agencies engaging in entrapment and things like that. So I mean, it's not so far-fetched to suggest that sort of cultural guiding and entrapment and those types of things couldn't be happening around the topic of anonymous online activity, as an example.
Oh, no, it seems quite rampant these days, if we're being completely honest.
Yeah. Well, so my guess is that over the next couple of years, we're going to see that a lot of that online activity gets unwound and people are going to lose their anonymity. And so this stuff will start to slowly fade away. I've referred to this online on a couple of instances as the great inversion, meaning that as I witness it as an American in China is becoming freer and more like America used to be, or what you hoped it was every day. Meanwhile, the U.S. is becoming less free and more like what they claim China is, every day. And I get that, 10 years from now, we'll be over here living the American dream, and Americans will be living in whatever it is that they thought China was, how many ever years ago.
I don't know. Things are very complicated over here right now. There's a lot of movement on the ground to legitimately establish a more traditionalist America, which would probably legitimately be better for the whole world and certainly better for Americans. But
you mean sort of like a more conservative America, is that right?
Not necessarily, because conservatism.
Well, I mean, I understand that the word conservative is incredibly loaded.
Oh yeah,
now.
A lot of baggage there.
So again, remember, my brain is stuck back 20 plus years ago. So when I say that, I don't mean it in the current atmosphere of what conservative means. I mean the 20 plus years ago conservative.
Yeah, the world that we lost. Gotcha.
Something like that. But so that's kind of what is ironic to me, is that if Americans understood truly what China today is, I think a lot more Americans would like China than do. And I think that's one of the reasons why so much money is spent on anti-China propaganda, because ultimately the US government doesn't want you to know that the Chinese are over here openly drinking beer on the street because they don't have open container laws, going camping and fishing anywhere that they can pitch a tent because they don't have, land use, where can you go camping laws, enjoying their big 4x4s and all this stuff, except they're all electric and they don't create any emissions problems. But, the point is that the Chinese middle class now is very much living the American dream, and it tends to be a class of people that is fairly well educated. They're fiscally conservative. I mean, they save money. They're living a fairly happy life. A lot of them own their own homes. Their kids are going to school and being very well educated. There's just a kind of way of living here that I think would be very appealing to a wide swath of Americans. And yet that lifestyle isn't really accessible to a wide range of Americans anymore.
Well, they call that ethno-nationalism and racist here in America, so that is what it is.
Yeah, that stuff I don't know. I don't really touch on very much. But I kind of get what you're saying. Like if you look at Japan or Korea or China, or these places where it's more ethnically, what's the word, cohesive
Homogenous.
or something like that. But I think that's really funny. I think it's another one of the misconceptions that Americans or people outside of China have about China. So it is anything but hugely cohesive here. So how like Americans, I'm a Texan, right? Yeehaw. I remember growing up, we hated people from New York, right? People from New York hate people from Texas. Well, guess what? People from Shanghai don't like people from Hong Kong, or Hong Kong people don't like people from Beijing. Like, they have very similar sort of cross-border, cross-province rivalries. And of course, the music, the food, the fashion, all these things also are wildly different. Plus, you do have a fairly significant ethnic minority populations here, and you also have fairly significant foreign, so say, for example, African diaspora living in China. So the notion of I'm going to butcher the word, the homogeneity. Homogeneity. It's really not what people think it is. There's a lot of unique expression of personal identity in China. So I don't think that homogeneity in that cultural sense is absolutely necessary. But I will tell you what China has that the U.S. doesn't, and that is a relatively singular trust and faith in the government. Right. So, everybody in China rightly feels that the government is doing all right by them as a nation and as a people. And therefore, the majority of the country can be like, yeah, we like our government. You cannot say the same of Americans. And by the way, that's very much by design, because if Americans could all get together as a mass, regardless of ethnic or whatever backgrounds, and they could all vote together one way or another, they could steer the country out of this crap, right? But because they can't, they can't.
Well, there's quite a lot of baggage to that. But you do make some good points in there. But another one being, too, when you've got... and I don't necessarily mean culturally ethno-nationalist. I mean the government itself. China is for the Chinese. America is kind of for everybody, and maybe America should just be for the Americans. But that's a whole can of worms and a whole other conversation in itself.
But I want to push back on that a little bit. That the Chinese Constitution and the laws as they are written, and I speak to this as an immigrant to China, they are humanist. They believe in human rights. So they don't look at ethnic background. They don't look at, nationality even. Like if I got in trouble here, or if I was to receive benefits here from the system, let's say from the medical, like going to the hospital, stuff like that, I am treated with respect and as an equal because I'm a human being. And, I'll give you an example of this. Like at some point, someone raised the question of what happens to the foreigners in China if World War III breaks out? Will the Americans all be put into concentration camps? And the Chinese government actually drafted a response to that and said, no, we consider people to be people first and foremost. We don't put their nationality on top of whether or not they have certain rights. Okay, so I mean, again, I get where you're coming from. I think from the outside it makes sense. It looks
well, and I also don't want to get into some of the more uncomfortable issues, you being in China, because there are some that I legitimately don't want to get you in trouble over.
Yeah, this is an area that I'm not.
So we'll keep it PG on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm not here to cause any trouble. We're here to have a conversation, after all.
But look, I think it's a fair enough thing. If you've got some ideas on that, I just want to make clear my experience with the system here, because I think a lot of people, they have different ideas about why the system here works than I think what really drives it. So that's all I'm trying to say.
Well, sure. And to be fair, it is important to provide a point of view. I wouldn't necessarily say opposite my own, but someone that has a very different lived experience than my learned experience. So that's just that's a healthy exchange that we should all be trying to have.
Absolutely.
And speaking of healthy exchanges, now didn't you have to deal with some other silly drama just very recently?
I mean, it's an almost weekly thing. So if you're thinking of something specific, you could.
I would have to get real specific on that. Man, I forget how much people get upset about you online.
Well, so I mean, one of the things that we see often is that they get wound up about our marketing emails. So I write our marketing emails. So anybody out there who's listening to this and who hates our marketing emails, I'm the guy. I'm the one that's writing the marketing emails. And we've seen what feels to me like manufactured drama around the marketing emails, specifically because there's been instances where I'll use the word urgent in the subject line. And then, there was a recent one where I wrote the subject line as urgent, do not open. And in parentheses, I wrote, they're watching. Well, so they went and got mad about that. They suggested that this was unhealthy for people who suffer with delusional paranoia or schizophrenia, something like that. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I feel this is a bit insulting to those people, because it's not like that subject line exists in a vacuum, right? It exists on an email from Plushie Dreadfuls.
Well, so it very much smacks of the I know better than you, and I am here to be offended on your behalf. How dare you not be offended?
Well, they're certainly trying to be offended on behalf of someone. I don't know.
Even if that someone is entirely fictional.
Yeah, I mean, they have to make up people. This is the other thing, is that there's a contradiction in the fact that they're going online and sharing this, because they're claiming that what they're sharing is harmful, and yet they're going and sharing it. So wait, aren't you then re-sharing something that's going to cause somebody to freak out? No, because you're doing it in context. There's that really important word of I guess a public service announcement, right? But then this raises the question of, why does context work for you, but you're not allowing context to work for me? And pointing out again that, like, the way my email reader works is that I get a preview of what's in the email. So I would see from Plushie Dreadfuls, and then I'd see urgent, and then I would see a Christmas themed, gingerbread man plushie. And I wrote a whole story that was meant to be like a kind of Ocean's 11 gone bad, where the gingerbread man and the reindeer are trying to pull a heist while Santa is out delivering Christmas presents, and will you harbor fugitives? I mean, there was this whole narrative built around it, and maybe it's a good
fun.
But I mean, to get mad about that, it feels to me like you're really, really reaching.
Yeah,
You're really having to
it
try very
smacks of
hard.
performative actions. It really does.
I guess, but it's one thing also for people to comment on that, which again, I'm all for free speech. If you want to go and write about our emails, and again, reminding everybody, fantastic, fan-fucking-tastic that you shared that on Reddit, because that sharing that in the plushies community on Reddit, as ridiculous as it was, bumped our sales by visibly noticeable amounts. Like, I reposted the graph to Twitter just because it was so, and the only reason that we knew it was posted to Reddit was because we see this huge spike in sales out of nowhere, and you're like, where is this coming from, right? And our suite of metrics tracking, all that kind of stuff, gives us insight into attribution for the traffic and the sales. And guess what? Maybe 1,000 people liked that post, meaning they agreed with the fact that I'm a horrible human being for writing the word urgent into the subject line. But tens of thousands of people from Reddit came as a result of that post to our shop, and hundreds of them purchased product off the back of that visit. So it's like, I don't know what these people think they're accomplishing in doing this, but yeah, it's just like that. It's like every single little thing that they can pick at, they will come and pick at and try to make drama out of. And again, all these years in the industry, in the games industry, 30 years in the games industry, I never saw anything like this. And then we come over to the plush world, and it's like a weekly occurrence. It's
oh yeah, so
really
much worse, so much. It's kind of breathtaking to see the amount of drama that's going on with. I mean, just your company alone. I can only imagine who else has got to be dealing with this nonsense. But
I mean, that's the thing. I don't see this kind of drama around other plush companies. I understand that there are lots of other plush companies in the world, but also we've become incredibly high visibility because our Google rep recently informed us that we're like now the number 3 most searched for plush brand in the world.
Wow, congratulations.
It's huge, dude. I mean, the amount of traffic we get and the way that the shop is performing is just next level. Like we're all the way in outer space now. There's days I wake up, I don't even understand it. And it gives me anxiety.
Well, to be fair, you do sell the best product for the money on the market. I've talked to Jen about this, and we talked about it a little bit before when you were on here. Nobody offers a plushie that's as nice as yours for the money.
That I know for sure. And that's something I talk to the team about. I think to myself sometimes, on the topic of like if we're taking advantage of people or not, or what. I wish people understood, like, we are selling at the lowest margin for us that we possibly can. Like, we could tack another $10 at least onto the price of our products. And if we did that, we would still be reasonably priced.
Oh, you'd be well under. You'd be well under. Yeah, because you sell a super premium product at a regular product price. Under.
Yeah, exactly. And I have resisted the urge through all of the ups and downs to crank our profit margins up, because ultimately I see this as something more than just a profit generating machine. I feel like we're actually making a difference in the world. And this comes all the way back to where we started with the event in Tokyo. There were lots of people who came to that event who had no idea who I was, had no idea of the games I worked on. They only knew me as one thing, the creator of Plushie Dreadfuls.
Oh,
and
cool.
They were coming to meet me purely as the creator of Plushie Dreadfuls, and they were ecstatic. They were like, oh my God, these products address an area of my life physically or mentally that no other product can come near. And they were genuine in that they had found something in our products that was incredibly meaningful and helpful to them. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why, like, I understand that the products occupy a really important space for some people that goes beyond just, hobby or collector.
Well, you've spoken to people and no one else had before.
What's that?
Well, you've spoken directly to certain groups of people that have never been addressed before, and that strikes home for them.
Well, I mean, the craziest thing, and we still get it pretty often, is when somebody writes in and says, "Your plush rabbit is what informed me that I needed to go see my doctor about a problem that I've had for years. You led me to treatment and fixing my problem."
Oh, that's cool.
Like that's crazy.
Oh, that's just really cool.
It's a good feeling, you know.
Oh,
So I
yeah,
mean that good feeling certainly helps to offset a lot of what comes our way. I have to say, for about a year, myself and the team, because we are fairly, we're all autistic, like very high level, high functioning, but very deeply autistic. Like myself, Jennifer is. But we're also highly empathetic when it comes to these kinds of what we feel like are irrational attacks on who we are or why we're doing what we're doing. We feel this painful desire to explain what it is that's going on and to try to rectify the situation. We think, and not wrongly, I realize now, that if we explain enough and if we could just get people to understand that the misunderstanding could go away, right? Now, after having tried for a year the turn the other cheek, go silent, leave it alone strategy, we've just said enough. Like we're tired of being bullied, and so we've begun pushing back quite forcefully on some of this nonsense, which brings us to you and me here today. This is the first time that I've gone on record talking to somebody this explicitly about what we've experienced, what we've gone through, and where we are now.
Well, firstly, thank you for being willing to come on and talk about it. And secondly, I'm happy I can present you with a platform to do so.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Least I could do. Least I could do. So, I don't want to keep you too long. I'm sure you got a whole day of stuff to get to. So, is there anything cool and upcoming with Plushie Dreadfuls, or yourself for that matter, that people need to be on the lookout for?
Oh man, we release new products every week. So, you know, the best thing is if people want to see what we're up to, just tune into the social media accounts. I have my accounts set to make clear that I'm not an official representative of Plushie Dreadfuls. So if you want the official line, just go follow the official accounts. But yeah, on my accounts is where you can see me posting art and updates on the game stuff. And I'm hoping that in the next couple of months, we'll start to be able to share more in-game stuff for Spare Hearts. So if people want to tune in and follow along on that adventure, then sure, give my socials a follow as well.
Absolutely. I'll make sure and link that below, of course, for everybody that's interested. If you aren't already, obviously. With that, goodness, I don't think I had any more super pressing questions. Just happy to have you on again, have another conversation about how things are going.
Absolutely. It was great chatting with you as well. And I hope we stayed out of the lava.
I think we did just fine. I think we did just fine. We might have got a toe a little warm here and there, but I think nothing's going to come of it, so we should be all right.
Absolutely. All right, man. It was good talking to you.
Absolutely. You as well. So you have a wonderful day, and we'll have to talk again once something new is happening with either Plushie Dreadfuls or one of the games.